what are your as a news company, like what is your strategy with SEO? Do you just publish or do you guys track and maintain the SEO of that?
SEO is a big pillar for us. So in April, we did around 120 million pages in a month.
Wow.
And out of that, around half of them was from Google, from different assets of Google. So Google News, Google Search Results, Google Discover, all these different platforms on Google, right? So SEO has been a big ether for us since 2014. We have done SEO. We have always tried to focus on SEO. We have learned a lot of SEO skills over time. And as a bootstrap company, and even as a media house, it never makes sense to spend money to get traffic, right? So SEO is the most scalable way that you can do it, right? And for news SEO, if you're a news company and you're not doing SEO, then you're missing the boat. What we do specifically, the big part is the linking strategy. So how you really structure your website decides if you're doing it right or wrong. So category, subcategory, tags, how they work together, how they link together. Then having a standard editorial SEO practice that, okay, this is how the subheadings, the titles, this is what links that you should put. These are the keywords that you're targeting. Every piece, there should be a reason, which angle and which keyword that you're targeting. So these kind of things we try to keep in mind from a content perspective. From a technical perspective, we use AMP still, even though Google talks about maybe it's required or not required, we do keep an AMP version of our website. We have actually built a tech stack that matches our non-AMP and AMP version, so it's exactly the same, which a lot of media houses don't do. Like being able to create the same experience on non and AMP because it's complicated, but because of tools like yours and in general understanding the ecosystem better over 8 years, we have figured out how to do it. Then Core Web Vitals, we did a big revamp last year to ensure that our Core Web Vital standards are up to the mark. We score 98 or 99 score all the time with real user data.
Core Web Vitals is such a huge metric for all the publishers, not just publishers, any website out there.
Any website. Yeah. Core Web Vitals have changed how the websites are structured.
And I remember initially it was so difficult, like, those LCP and FIP and those metrics and all those, it was extremely tough to understand, but now people have gotten used to it. And we have been doing huge work in Core Web Vital as well. So we've got some products in lineup as well on that. So what tools do you use to track SEO or track it? That could also be some errors or issues about Core Web Vitals or page speed, could be anything. What are some important tools that you use as a publisher?
Yeah, so there are different aspects that we are tracking all the time. So there is first the technical aspect that, okay, if everything is right from a tech SEO perspective, then there is a long-term content SEO aspect. If everything is right, structurally, are more keywords ranking over time? Is our domain authority improving? Is our page authority improving? And the third aspect is day-to-day news SEO aspect. I'll go one by one for all three. For tech SEO, I think definitely Search Console is the starting point. No matter how many tools exist in the market, Search Console is the source of truth. So we have a habit of checking things there all the time, ensuring that links, no errors are coming, checking those crawling metrics, etc. If everything is right. Then the second thing we do is in our publishing pipeline, we have an AMP validator check, which allows us to ensure that when we are pushing things out, the amount of issues that we have faced because of a wrong AMP code going live is very high. And it's difficult to see it, and you easily lose your ranking authority quickly if there's even a small mistake in AMP code, and Google cannot validate that code. As an AMP plugin, you have, Ahmed, you have the biggest AMP plugin in the ecosystem. We existed because of your plugin for a long while because I think AMP takes away the load of the traffic from your website. So there were moments I remember we would just keep running our website completely on AMP because infrastructure wise we couldn't handle the load at that point. So
I'm glad that we could make some difference to some people's lives.
I'm sure there are quite a few people who have made a difference because like AMP, it's the best plugin in the ecosystem.
I'm glad to hear that. So let's come back to the tools, right? Technical SEO. You were using Search Console, and then you have internal AMP validation as well.
Yeah.
What other tools do you use apart from that?
We use Moz. Moz we use quite a bit. Then we have we use Lockflare. So it's more of a log dump analysis. So it allows us to keep a real-time track of crawling of Google, which is really critical for us to understand how much weightage Google is giving to our news. Are they spending time really tracking our website? So let's say we even have pipelines checking how much crawl we got today, which piece got hit from the moment of publishing, how long did it take for the piece to get crawled by Google. Then we track when the first hit came from, let's say, Google AMP project. All these things we track to keep a measure of authority.
I guess for a news publisher, the moment the news comes out, it needs to, get hit by Google, right? And it needs to be there on the Google Discover.
Yes.
And people fail many times in that process. And though they are the first ones to, so I've heard this from some publisher. I don't remember his name, but he said that though you are, even if you are the first one to publish in the world, I mean, you are the first one to break out that news, people could copy and then they could rank higher just because they have the technicality right.
Yes, technicality and topic authority. So it's not just about breaking the news, it's about Google knowing that you have breaking the news. So Google knowing means that first your domain should have that authority that Google is actually spending the energy to crawl you immediately. Because you could publish first, but if Google took you 30 minutes to crawl an index, not just crawl, index on their search, discover news, then you're 30 minutes late for Google.
How do you lower that time? Like for you
how
guys,
do you lower that time? I think the biggest thing that is in your hand is making it super fast. So your website should be super fast, because if your response time is high, Google can actually allot you more crawl budget. Then secondly, having an amazing sitemap. Your sitemap should load really, really quickly. If we had moments where our sitemap was slow and the crawl budget significantly fell down. Then the third thing is linking. So there are certain pages that Google considers more authority and certain less. So let's say if you have that piece on your homepage, then let's say that piece is on your social media handles. The moment it gets there, that also plays a role in indexing. And fourth, if you're getting traffic from other sources. So let's say if you have a good social media audience, good Instagram or a good Twitter audience, or let's say newsletter. So you can use your users as a push to get that visibility of traffic. And then Google has an ecosystem to figure out that, okay, this piece, some users are reading on the internet, which really increases the index time.
So just to break that down and make it simpler, social media essentially helps you to build the authority. Would that be right way to say it?
It's a hypothesis we have, but we definitely believe it plays a role. So if you get a good push from social media, it has an impact on other platforms as well.
Right. And that's the thing with Google, right? It never wants to tell you everything 100%, right? It's always they'll always give some part of the knowledge, and then rest of it is based on your experience.
Well, yeah, true, but it's also the generation of machine learning algorithms, I feel. So it's not just engineers building it, it's the algorithm also evolving over time, right? So let's say I can totally imagine an engineer build, you have a feature set that you have built to optimize that algorithm. You cannot tell which one is playing a major role.
Right.
So I think it's a more black box analysis. The good thing is it's fair for everybody because they don't tell it to anybody, which is great, because there is no unfair advantage that a big media house has compared to a small one.
Right.
You could start from a dorm room like us and still become big.
Right. And it's not a, if or else kind of a feature thing where if you are doing that and I would just copy that, it might not work for me, because the algorithm is kind of it's more of it's evolving on its own. No single person can copy and just become the same. So that is also a very interesting part of that. So let's just quickly finish up the tools that you're using for the
these were the tech SEO side. I think for long-term SEO we mostly use Moz and Search Console keyword tracking. Then we have some sort of like Slack, Telegram integration, sometimes sending those messages, or even team just taking screenshots and putting it to the groups. And then for real-time SEO news, we use NewsDash. NewsDash is a tool, a good friend of mine, John, he has made that tool. John Shahata is his name. So it's the best tool out there for publisher news. It tracks top stories, it tracks ranking on news.google.com, all these data, that real-time data in a frequency of even 5 minutes, which most of the SEO tools don't provide, which is a great advantage. Generally, SEO industry has worked on historical data, which makes sense from an e-commerce audience or long-term search results audience. But for news and top stories, something more real-time is required, and News Dash allows us to do that. That's what we use for SEO.